Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Happy Friday and happy 4th, Alaska. It's July 4th, 2014. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder with the National Weather Service. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather with us today. www.weather.gov/Alaska is your source online for weather information around the state 24 hours a day. Of course, you can find information in between the shows on Twitter, Facebook, and on YouTube after this show, of course. If you miss a piece of it that you really want to go back and listen to again, you can easily do that by going to YouTube, and on the search bar, just type in AKWX TV, or Alaska Weather TV for short. You can watch the entire broadcast there. In the afternoon, of course, you get a brief snippet of kind of the surface chart overview, what's happening with the weather around Alaska. That comes out around 4 o'clock or so. And the weather info line is open all the time, 1-800-472-0391. Give that a call if you haven't recently, and check out your forecast that way via telephone. Hazardous weather outlook, as you know, does include some flooding issues around the interior and parts of northern southeast around the Haines, Chilkoot, and Klondike Highway region, as well as the Chilkat River. We'll continue to watch the flooding issues there, as water levels are likely still coming up there, but the good news is for the interior, they're slowly receding, so improvements there in the interior. Let's take a look at the hydrograph, or the measure of the river, at least one particular spot there near Skagway. The Taya River earlier this afternoon, around 4 o'clock, was at 17.47 feet. You can see the forecast here up to 18.38 feet. The record stage is 19.9, so we're not really close to that yet, but it has been creeping up above moderate flood stage and is expected to recede as we get closer to Sunday night and into Monday. So right now, flood warnings there. The Chilkoot Trail is closed. The National Park Service saying there's water expected to go over the trail if it's not already, and of course causing flooding concerns there. And crests around the Skagway River is expected later tonight, with the Taya River expected to crest as we get closer to tomorrow and into Saturday. So still watching for some improvements to start there. Flooding probably getting worse before it gets better. Now in the interior, a little bit of a different story. The water's already going down there. Looks like the Little Chena crested already at 26.6 feet or so. It's the second highest crest since the floods in 1967. That means a lot of, that is a pretty remarkable mark to achieve for those of you who are familiar with that flood around the Fairbanks area in 1967. So improvements already being seen there. Flood warnings continue until Saturday morning around 7:45, and we'll continue to watch for improvements. However, there is more rain coming. We'll talk about that in a few minutes, but first a quick check on the fire danger where it has not been raining. Conditions are drying out, temperatures are heating up, humidity going down, all the right things there for fire danger to start going back up. And you'll notice just over the few spots that we had marked on the map yesterday, fire danger is now back to high levels across scattered areas in the Yukon, Kuskokwim valleys, across the Sitna Valley, across the Kenai Peninsula, areas around Tok and up toward Northway, and also in the Yukon Flats. So the rain is certainly a beneficial part of the weather pattern. And when we don't have that, things quickly turn back over to dangerous fire conditions. So that is starting to grow once again. Now look out at the satellite picture for the Bering Sea and the North Pacific. You can see the moisture stream coming off of eastern Asia, connecting with the main traffic pattern, the main superhighway of moisture and weather coming across the North Pacific. The other part of this is we have a pretty decent trough sitting right across the Bering, and that is helping to give a pretty broad circulation of low pressure across the Gulf of Alaska and feeding more moisture into south and east, some of which is flooding some parts of northern southeast tonight, and keeping the weather pretty dry and warm for the rest of southwest and south central Alaska and the interior. A look at the visible satellite picture shows low pressure working its way up toward southern parts of southeast. This batch of moisture will likely move back around, giving at least scattered light rain and maybe showers to parts of southeast in the coming days, but still more rain in those areas. And then we're watching the moisture and another disturbance in the upper atmosphere move from east to west. So while tomorrow doesn't look terribly wet for the interior, it does look like there will be an increase in precipitation, mainly from Northway to Fairbanks, maybe the Yukon Flats, in some of the places, of course, upstream from Fairbanks that have already seen a decent amount of rain in the last several weeks. So something to keep an eye on. It's not a lock yet, but it does look like there's more rain coming in from east to west as we get into the end of the weekend, and then certainly the first part of next week. Meanwhile, southwest, the west coast, the Seward Peninsula, North Slope, things are pretty quiet there. And as such, temperatures are going up, especially across the southern third of the state. Kodiak's looking high and dry today, a beautiful day there. And on the North Slope, maybe a few spot showers around the Brooks Range, but right now thunderstorms don't seem to be a major issue there. Now, with high pressure parked right off of Kaktovik, it wasn't too hard to get a whole lot of fog there today. Dense fog was seen at least by mid-afternoon. Low pressure is working up southeast, some scattered showers there across the southeastern part of Alaska. And here's another wave of low pressure down to the south. The whole circulation's really rotating in this fashion here. So anything across the eastern Gulf is working up towards southeast right now from the south, and anything across the mainland is working its way toward the west coast. And then we've got a trough of low pressure here guiding some of that moisture out of the Bering Sea across the Aleutians, bringing some showers at times here. But things are pretty stable around Kodiak and south central, and for right now, most of the interior. As we look at tonight, you can see the very dry weather across the mainland here. A few areas of light rain and fog as this wave moves slowly toward the west coast. Probably won't make it thanks to the stable ridge of high pressure here. Notice that pocket of rain is working northward once again toward southern parts of southeast, the Dixon entrance there. And on the north side of this is an opportunity for some heavy rain. Looks like some of the heavier rainfall will be north of the Yukon border there, out of the Haines and Skagway passes, so a little bit further north, but some of that certainly could move its way southward. So we'll have to see how that sets up. But there's still going to be more rain falling in southeast, so keep a watch on that. Around the Alcan border, some isolated storms are possible, a better chance for showers, probably not a whole lot of thunder activity across western Alaska. Looks like a pretty quiet and dry night for most places. Once we get into Saturday, the rain picks up a little bit more in southern parts of southeast. Not a really heavy dousing, but more rain at this point. And then you'll notice on the fringe of that rainy pattern is northern southeast. So Haines and Skagway, you're looking at an opportunity for some light rain, but probably not the meat of this one. Showers and storms across the western Yukon and starting to creep back into the Copper River Basin on an isolated fashion, mainly north of the Alaska Range. Saturday still looking pretty dry by comparison to what could be coming back on Sunday. And pockets of light rain and drizzle crossing through the Bering there ahead of that trough. Maybe a few showers or storms across the western Alaska Range and into the upper Kuskokwim and perhaps lower to mid-Yukon Valley. Also looking at some showers around the eastern Brooks Range and around the Noatak and Kobuk Valleys, probably some pockets of showers there with high pressure still sitting across the Arctic coast. Kodiak's still looking dry, but that could change by Sunday with showers moving back in. Low pressure starting to encroach on the territory controlled by high pressure that's kept things a little bit quiet. By Sunday, it looks like the wave of low pressure will work in from east to west, and that will probably kick off showers for many parts of southern southeast, southern south central Alaska, and maybe even southwestern Alaska. Now, before you start to think that this is going to be another repeat of what we've already seen, not so sure that's going to be the case if you're in the central and eastern interior. It doesn't look like we're talking about inches upon inches upon inches of rain. But it is more wet weather, and because you already have saturated soils, because you already have swollen rivers, this will be watched very carefully as we get into Sunday afternoon and again on Monday. So something to keep an eye on Watch the forecast if you've had flooding in the last couple weeks, and be prepared to take action if a flood advisory or even a flood warning is issued for your area, and know where you're going to go and how you're going to get there before your method of travel and road to safety is cut off there by any more swollen water and rivers. Showers will continue across southeast. That seems to be thinning out just a little bit as we get into Sunday. Pockets of light rain, fog, perhaps across the Bering again. Some areas will see some showers there across the western Aleutians and the Alaska Peninsula. Anything in the west looks pretty dry. Anything in south central, a little bit more showery than anything we'll see on Saturday. And then a better chance for convection and showers and storms across the eastern Alaska Range and some of the upper Yukon Valley areas into the western parts of Yukon Territory by the end of the weekend. Monday and Tuesday look wetter. Temperature-wise now, things in southeast are holding mainly in the upper 50s today, from Juneau all the way down to Ketchikan and Annette. Really not a huge change in temperatures there. Petersburg a little bit milder in the lower 60s. Across the Alcan border, you'll see temps there in the upper 40s as you get into the southern Yukon. 59 around Yakutat. 60s for Prince William Sound today. Couldn't have been a nicer day in Valdez. It looked like 66. 72 in Anchorage at 3 o'clock. Low to mid 60s up along the Cook Inlet. 73 around Palmer and Wasilla, 76 in Talkeetna. The eastern side of Anchorage was even warmer, as you would imagine. 75 around Fairbanks. Same goes for Eagle today. 72 at Fort Yukon. Looking further north, temps under that fog bank around Kaktovik struggled in the upper 30s today. Meanwhile, with sunshine, Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse saw readings in the upper 50s. 43 in Barrow, 63 in Atkasuk, 52 in Wainwright. A beautiful day there. 40s, 50s, and even a few 60s there around Kotzebue Sound. Shishmaref was 46, about the same there for Kivalina. And Kotzebue showing 59. Nome was 46 degrees. Unalakleet 53 degrees. And once you got into the interior, Galena, Ruby, many areas across McGrath, all the way down to the Kuskokwim, easily in the upper 60s, if not the mid to upper 70s there. Just a blistering hot day compared to where we had been just a few months ago. Around Southwest, 60s and 70s there. Dillingham 64, and the Alaska Peninsula generally in the mid to upper 60s as well. Sandpoint about 54. 52 around Unalaska Dutch Harbor, about 50 degrees for the Pribilofs today, and 40s and 50s for the central and western chain. Overnight low temps then will stay mild across southwest, the mid-Yukon Valley, even the Yukon Flats holding in the mid-50s tonight. Plenty of sun for you up in the Arctic coast, and still in the mid-30s overnight. Kotzebue Sound looking at temperatures in the upper 40s, maybe even 50 degrees in some cases there in the northern side of the Seward Peninsula. Low 50s for south central, 51 in Kodiak, 40s and 50s for southeast. And Fairbanks looking at 52 and 64 for Kodiak by tomorrow afternoon. Now for the interior and southwest, look for high temperatures in the upper 70s and lower 80s. Tanana, 82 degrees tomorrow. It is going to be a toasty day for you. Upper 70s and lower 80s for the central and eastern interior. Yukon Flats approaching 80 degrees at least. 40s and 50s for the Arctic coast. Nome 65 degrees. How do you like that? Also looking at low to mid 60s for a large chunk of southeast. Prince William Sound, a toasty day again, at least in the mid 60s for some. 64 in Kodiak. 50s and 60s for the Alaska Peninsula. And about 50 degrees from Dutch Harbor on Alaska and west. Maybe even the Pribilofs sneaking up on that 50-degree mark. St. Lawrence Island close to 50 as well. Wow, what a day. Flying weather then, you show IFR conditions across the Arctic coast all the way through the Bering Sea, grazing the west coast, maybe around Norton Sound. Nunivak Island, we should see IFR conditions by the afternoon with MVFR right along coastal areas, mainly due to fog at times. Showers and storms could pop up across the Alaska Range and across the eastern range, so watch for that to change your visibility somewhat. MVFR conditions by the afternoon should be limited to mainly extreme southern parts of southeast and the coast. Pass conditions look like VFR should prevail through Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass tomorrow, so good and smooth sailing there. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass may see a storm affecting visibility, but right now we're calling VFR, and that will continue into Rainy Pass as well. Not expecting as much convection there. Windy Pass could see a better chance for a few storms. Isabel Pass, VFR conditions for your Saturday. Mentasta Pass, maybe an isolated shower or storm there, otherwise VFR. Tanita Pass, we expect to see visual flight rule. Porter's Pass should be VFR, and it looks like Chilkoot and White Pass looking at least some improving conditions. Here's a look at the freezing levels then, 8 to 10,000 feet across southeast, across the Arctic coast, anywhere from 8,000 feet to maybe a little bit higher once you get further south, closer to 9,000 feet. The coldest air well to the north and west, And you can see some of that trying to drop southward into the central chain, and then quickly those levels rise to 10, even 12,000 feet in the western chain. Icing potential above 10 to below 15,000 feet, mainly in this narrow corridor from the Gulf of Anadyr to the southern tip of the Alaska Peninsula and very far eastern chain. Otherwise, things are pretty dry for now, and as you would expect, things are warming up as a result. Tomorrow's jet stream shows that huge trough of low pressure controlling our weather here. Underneath that, though, we have high pressure guiding that very dry air around Alaska and coming off of the continent. As such, things are pretty mild right now, but you can see the main path corridor. If this were to lift a little bit further northward, it wouldn't be too hard to get some moisture back in the mix for most of Alaska. At 9,000 feet, high pressure across western Canada, guiding very light winds around in a cyclonic fashion. Low pressure here, anticyclonic I should say, low pressure sitting just off of southeast, guiding a little bit stronger flow here in from the east and southeast at 25 knots. And you see that north and westerly flow coming across the western chain, anywhere from 20 to about 40 knots. Wind speeds across the Chukchi Seacoast also pretty light, about 5 to 10 knots there, picking up a little bit north of Barrow. High pressure is a little bit further east in this case at 3,000 feet. You can see the wind spreading out and away from that, around 15 knots, crossing over Prince William Sound there and wrapping around low pressure affecting southeast with stronger winds closer to the Dixon entrance than what you'll find perhaps across Yakutat or the west coast in this case, about 5 to 10 knots there, mainly from the south and east. Turbulence potential is pretty limited, but of course with thunderstorms that does imply a greater severe risk of isolated turbulence around those towers there, so watch for those to develop mainly in the afternoon and the evening hours. And above 2,000 feet you might find a little bit of light chop across the western and central parts of the chain. Let's look at your aviation forecast. We'll be back with your marine weather here in just a few minutes.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ed Cornfield. On behalf of the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation and Alaska Public Media, welcome to another edition of Hangar Flying. My guest this evening is Brigadier General Tim O'Brien. General O'Brien is the Assistant Adjutant General, Air, Joint Forces Headquarters, Alaska, and the commander of the Alaska Air National Guard. During his long career, he has had many assignments in the Guard. One of his more interesting assignments, in my opinion, was as commander of the 210th Air Rescue Squadron. Sir, it's a pleasure to welcome you to Hangar Flying, and I want to thank you personally and on behalf of our viewers, for your service to our community, our country, and to the state of Alaska.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So let's talk about your start in aviation. What got you started in wanting to be a pilot?
Well, I think what happened was I got convinced to go show up at a rehearsal. You know, I graduated with a music degree, and I got convinced to go show up at a rehearsal at a 561st Air Force Band, and I went, yeah, I'm not going to do that. But long story short, I went for lunch. They offered to buy me pizza, so I did, and I got hooked. And then I played one too many air shows, and I never wanted to be in the position to say I wish I hadda. So I said, you know, I think I can fly, and I went before one of the pilot boards, and I got picked up to become a HH-60 pilot, or actually old HH-3s back in the day, and then later HH-60s. And I haven't looked back.
So is there any history of aviation in your family? Or?
Actually, no, not so much. I don't know what happened. I don't like being told no.
So tell me some of the jobs that you've had since you've been in the military.
So like any young lieutenant, you know, you start out as snack officer maybe, and scheduler and training officer, so forth and so on. But I did a staff assignment out in DC where I called myself a high price shopper. I did acquisitions, so I bought airplane parts, pieces, radars, FLIRs, things like that. Let's see, I spent a year in school down in Montgomery, Alabama. I ran the officer training school for the United States Air Force for a while. I was the squadron commander for the 210th Rescue Squadron, and finally I was the wing commander up at Eielson Air Force Base for the 168th Air Refueling Wing, the KC-135s.
So now what's it like being the head of one of the largest guard commands by volume and size for the state of Alaska?
It's actually a lot of fun, although my hair was much darker color until I got this job. But we have about 2,000 Alaska Air National Guardsmen in the state at 2 different wings at Eielson and JBER. And as you know, we do everything from C-17s to C-130s to HC-130s to air defense to space warning and surveillance to KC-135. So we've got a lot of mission up here.
Oh, neat. So the 210th has always been, I mean, I've really admired the people that work in the 210th, that fly there and do all the stuff, the rescue thing. So tell us a little bit about the 210th and your involvement.
So the 210th is actually how I got hired here in the first place, and it was kind of an interesting thing. So it's back in 1992, and I did a telephone interview, and I was a young first lieutenant at the time, and the hiring authority calls me up and he says, so how much Alaska flying time do you have? And I said, well, none, sir. And a little pause, and he said, so have you ever been to Alaska? And I said, well, no, sir. And there was another long pause, and he said, so you don't have any Alaska flying time? And I said, no, sir, I don't. And he says, well, you want the job? and so the rest is kind of history. We moved up in 1992, and I started flying Paypox up here for the 210th Rescue Squadron. So I've been doing rescue in Alaska since '92 with various trips out of state to do staff assignments and other things. And it's been an absolute pleasure to do this. I mean, there are very few jobs in my mind where you actually get to see the rewards of your job right there. You either are saving somebody's life, helping somebody in distress, or most sadly and importantly, you're bringing somebody's loved one home so they can have closure.
So what's the overall mission of the 210th then?
Well, it's to, obviously they have a warfighting mission, a federal mission, which is combat search and rescue anywhere around the world. And if you can fly in Alaska, you can pretty much fly anywhere. But even more so, we have a 24/7 alert for military fighter flying activity in the state of Alaska, which just so happens to nicely be available under the 11th Air Force's authority to do civilian SAR as a bonus to the state and to our Alaska residents.
So I have some pictures that I'd like to start showing. One is maybe you can talk about this one.
Sure.
Should come up the screen shortly.
This first one is a picture of one of the things that makes the 210th Rescue Squadron quite unique. So what you see in this photo is an HC-130, which is that C-130, obviously highly modified, and that's an HH-60 filling up, taking gas from that HC-130. So about 1,000 pounds a minute, and we carry roughly about 3,800 pounds, so we have to be on the hose for about 3 minutes to get a full tank of gas. But with something like this, we can range all over the state. So if you want to fly nonstop to Adak, it's possible. Bring a tanker with you. If you want to fly from here to Juneau, bring a tanker with you. We've had, well, you'll see, but we've had, this allows us to go anywhere, any place in this state, at any time of day.
Or night.
Or night.
Or night.
Makes it a little bit more challenging because it is hose and drogue, and you do have to make a run at that basket. And now if you've got a set of night vision goggles on your face, you know, you've only got a 40-degree field of view, and so it can be a little challenging on a no-moon night with no illumination.
It's very interesting. Well, General, I'm going to have to stop you now, and I'd like you to come back on our next show, but we're running out of time. So, folks, I want you to thank you for watching, and fly safe. We'll have the General back next week.
And happy 4th to both of you gentlemen. Here's a look at the sea ice edge as analyzed today, and you'll notice some open water there, a little more of that lead showing up there north of Kaktovik and north and east of Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse. So not open just yet all the way from Point Lay up to Barrow, but certainly seeing some improvements with the recent warm weather. So watch for more there. Anytime you want to check out the latest information from the sea ice edge, easily done. Go to weather.gov/anchorage/ice.php, or just go to weather.gov/Alaska, and on the left-hand side of your screen, look for Ice Desk, and you'll get that information there as well. Here's a look at the marine weather now for southeast. Tomorrow, a light wind and variable in the Lynn Canal, 2-foot seas there. Also more of an easterly flow coming across Stevens Passage and Frederick Sound. More of a southeasterly wind the further south you go inside the inner waterways there, and then we get a broad offshore flow from Yakutat all the way down to Craig, about 15 to 20 knots or so, and 4 to 5 foot seas, the highest seas up around Icy Cape and Cape Fairweather around Yakutat. Now as we get into Sunday, you'll notice that southeasterly wind along the coast really starting to pick up there thanks to low pressure coming in from the west. Across the inner waterways, a 10 to 15 knot wind, generally from the southeast as well. One exception, and the winds will stay a little more light up across the Lynn Canal, 10 knots there with a 2-foot sea on Sunday. Now across South Central, look for a southwesterly flow to pick up during the day and probably switch around a little bit to that southwesterly flow from a southeast wind Saturday afternoon. So the winds are going to come up and become southwesterly Saturday, 10 to 20 knots there, and west of Kenai, those seas could be up as high as 6 feet, so keep that in mind if you're heading out. Southeasterly winds inside of Prince William Sound with seas around 3 feet, still not too bad, but the seas are coming up, and easterlies outside of Prince William Sound to Resurrection Bay and south of Homer into the western Gulf, 20 to 25 knots, and you can see that stronger southeasterly push coming across the southern tip of the Kenai as well. a 6-foot sea there. Otherwise, light and variable winds on either side of Kodiak Island, 3-foot seas in the Strait, and on the eastern side of the island, 4-foot seas are expected there, only with 10-knot winds there. Now that's going to change in the seas, and the winds will come up a little bit more on Sunday around Kodiak. A northeasterly flow then west of the Barrens at 20 knots, diminishing somewhat as it gets into the Strait, and then more of an easterly onshore flow to Kodiak at 15 knots with a 5-foot sea. On the western and northern Gulf, 15 to 25-knot winds with 7-foot seas outside of Prince William Sound. The winds and the seas coming down just a little bit inside Prince William Sound, and southwesterlies in the northern part of the Cook Inlet with 4-foot seas expected there for Anchorage and north of Kenai. Now, for the Alaska Peninsula, winds should be pretty light there on the Bering side, around 10 knots with a northwest flow inside of Bristol Bay. A little more variable as you get north of Cold Bay with 2-foot seas there. Northwesterlies east of Chignik and south of Kodiak Island with 5 to 6-foot seas there on the Pacific side. As we get into Sunday, you'll see winds becoming a little more variable around Sand Point, an easterly flow coming into Chignik and south of Castle Cape. Light southerlies inside Bristol Bay with a 2-foot sea, a little more variable flow there as you move farther west into the Bering. Across the Aleutians, look for a west and northwesterly flow, about 15 knots or so for the eastern chain, a little more variable, and light winds north of Unalaska and Nikolsky with a 3-foot sea, 6-foot seas generally in the Pacific side, and across the western chain, 20 knots with 5 to 6-foot seas there for Saturday. Once we get into Sunday, the winds diminish somewhat, the seas come down, about 4-foot seas expected from Kiska out toward Attu, and more of a variable and light wind across the central and eastern chain, still holding on to 15-knot winds north of Adak. Look for more of a northwesterly flow, though, on the Pacific side with a 5-foot sea. Across the west coast, winds are generally 10 to 15 knots, variable north of Nunivak Island, more southeasterly for St. Lawrence Island and around the St. Matthew Island waters, and southeast winds for the Pribilofs. In Kuskokwim Bay, that's a northwesterly flow, though, at 15 knots. Becoming onshore at 10 knots, a westerly wind with a 2-foot sea, and more of a northerly flow around St. Lawrence Island, otherwise variable, and 10 knots with 2-foot seas in the west. For the Arctic coast, look for a northwesterly flow north of Kaktovik, 3-foot seas there. Otherwise, light winds and more of a east and northerly flow across the Chukchi Sea coast, becoming 15 knots and strengthening as we get into Sunday with north and northeasterly winds there, and a broad easterly flow sweeping across the Beaufort Sea coast at 15 knots with 3-foot seas north of Kaktovik. As we recap what's happening around Alaska tonight, look for continued light rain and showers for south and east. Otherwise, most areas are going to be dry tonight for the 4th. For Saturday, a few showers and storms will pop up mainly in the east around the Copper River Basin and along the Alcan. Light rain will continue for southeast, diminishing somewhat across the north as flood warnings continue for many areas there. For Sunday, a better chance for rain to pick up across the Alaska Range and points south. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather, and happy 4th.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.